Welcome to OmniFocus Workflows with Mike Schmitz, and you're very welcome whether you're joining here live, and we've got people from all over the world that have joined this live session today, and you're very welcome if you're watching a recording. I hope you get some great value from what Mike has to share today. Just before we get into Mike's tour of his OmniFocus system, I just want to briefly mention Learn OmniFocus if you're finding out about Learn OmniFocus for the first time. And this is a site I launched just over 4 years ago, back in 2014, after working with people as a consultant and coach for many years, helping them really make the best use of OmniFocus and live fulfilling and productive lives. So it's great to see it grow over the years. I'm based in Vancouver, Canada, and conveniently that's just down the road from the Omni Group. And I've been down to their office several times, and it's always great to meet the wonderful team there and to give some input, not just from my own use of OmniFocus, but on behalf of the Learn OmniFocus community. So yeah, really great team down there in Seattle. And over the years, had people join from 77 countries. So it just amazes me that we've got people from all over the world. And that's something I love about this work that I'm doing, is the opportunity to connect with people in so many different cultures and different parts of the world, doing many different things, many different talents, and I'm sure this will grow over time. I have thought about localizing some of the content, translating some of the content, so if that's something you're interested in, definitely let me know. We'd probably do German and Spanish and French first, and then hopefully add some other languages as well. So that's something that's a definite possibility at this point. This session you're on right now is called Learn OmniFocus Live. It's one of the 3 live components that I currently have for Learn OmniFocus. So this particular one is a workflow guest. I also do some theme sessions, and I'll be talking about the next theme session in just a moment. And these sessions are recorded, so you can go back and review, or if you're not able to come to the live session, you can watch it afterwards. If you haven't been to a live session, they're open to all Learn OmniFocus members. I definitely recommend coming and checking it out. And in addition to getting the content that you'll get through the recordings, you can also meet some other people. We have some informal chit-chats before we get going, and you can ask questions and so forth. So I definitely encourage you to check that out. If you want to meet in a smaller group and talk about your OmniFocus setup and get some feedback on that, this is where OmniFocus Office Hours comes in. And these are sessions of up to 10 people, so we purposely keep it small. And to keep everything confidential, they're not recorded, and everyone is asked to respect the confidentiality of our small groups. So there's, as I'll mention in a moment, there's a couple more coming up in August, and there'll be some additional sessions scheduled for September soon as well. I've also been doing private coaching and consulting for many years, and that's something I still absolutely love to do. And if you want to take a deep dive and have some one-on-one attention, you can check out the Learn OmniFocus website for some more information on that. And these can be recorded if you want. If you want to be able to go back and review it later, we can record those sessions. So a little peek of what's coming soon. The next live session is called Tapping into the Power of OmniFocus 3 for Mac, and I did one on iOS a little while back, and I'm really excited to be showcasing all of the power that's coming with this new Mac release. And I'll be going through some of the main features, especially those that are new in OmniFocus 3. And there'll certainly be plenty of tips and tricks and just little things to do things more efficiently. So that's taking place on Wednesday, September 26th, and that'll be from 10 to 11 a.m. Pacific time. And there's a good chance that OmniFocus for Mac 3 will be out to that point. If not, it'll be very close. If you haven't seen OmniFocus 3 for Mac, and I know some of you here on the beta, actually, if you want to type into the chat box, if you're currently using the beta, it'd be great to see how many people have gotten access to that. And I know there's some that are waiting patiently in the wings to get onto the beta. I've been using it since the beta first launch, and I'm happy to report it's shaping up to be an absolutely stellar release. So if you haven't had a chance to see it yet, I'll just share a few screenshots to give you a taste of what's coming. One thing to point out is the look might change between now and the release, so there are still some adjustments being made to the user interface and colors and things like that. So it won't look exactly like this, but it'll probably be pretty close to what you're seeing now. So one of the big things, I think probably the number one feature request for OmniFocus 3 is tags, and we have them on iOS now, and it's really great to have them on the Mac as well, and that opens up all kinds of workflow possibilities. So this is what tags currently look like on the Mac version. The forecast view has been completely revamped as well, so you can see the appointments in line with your due projects and actions. And I find this a very natural way to relate OmniFocus to the calendar. There's just it's nice to be able to see everything in one place and see what you've got on today, and also what's coming down the pike. I'm just got a little bit of background. I was just gonna make sure everything is muted there. Okay, there we go. Another really exciting addition to OmniFocus 3 for Mac is the custom perspectives, or the advanced perspectives. These are provide the same or very similar functionality to what we see on iOS, and this is a peek of what it looks like in its current form. This is one that I use regularly. It displays a list of all active projects, and it'll exclude single action lists. It'll exclude projects that are deferred off to the future, that sort of thing. The Learn OmniFocus office hours, there's 2 scheduled for August, as I mentioned. So August 22nd is the next one. That's 4 to 5 Pacific time, PM. And then August 29th is from 9 to 10 a.m. Pacific. And hopefully that'll accommodate everyone. If you want to come to these and you're just not finding a date and time that works, definitely let me know, and I can see about putting some more in place. Just a couple more things to point out. Excuse me. If you haven't seen it already, there's a new page on the website dedicated to tags. So you can go to learnomnifocus.com/tags. And this is going to be a growing resource for just showcasing how tags can be used. And I don't necessarily recommend creating all of the tags that I'm including in the examples, but at least reading through it and see which ones really resonate. And here's an example of some focus tags, and I've included some emojis in there. So if you like having emojis in your tags, you can even just copy and paste them right into OmniFocus. And if there's any that aren't in here that you use regularly and find are working well, definitely let me know. I'm always looking for new items to add to the tag directory. And similarly, there's also a directory of advanced perspectives. So these are ones that are specifically for OmniFocus 3. And I think there's 10 there currently, and I have some more that I'm looking forward to adding soon. This is an example of one I use quite a bit, which brings up a list of all of the actions that are untagged, and it purposely excludes the ones that are in the inbox as well. So another example of what can be done in OmniFocus 3 that just wasn't feasible in OmniFocus 2. And without further ado, I'm happy to introduce Mike Schmitz. And just a few things about Mike before we get going. He's joining us from Appleton, Wisconsin. And he wears many hats. And one reason I was very excited to have him on the show is I really want to know how he does it all, how he keeps all his ducks in a row. In addition to all the things he does on the work side of things, he also has 5 kids. And so I'm just in awe of all the things that he creates. So one of his areas of focus is his blog, which is at mikeschmitz.me, and I'll include that with the recording as well, of the link. He's also a project manager at Asian Efficiency, and I've been following their work for many years. One of the other Asian Efficiency members, Brooks, lives here in Vancouver. I've had a chance to meet Tan in the past, so really impressed with the work that they're doing. If you're a fan of ScreenCastsOnline, the Don McAllister site, you'll recognize Mike from there. He's been doing some great screencasts over there, including one on OmniFocus. And definitely check out his work there. And as if that weren't enough, he's also hosting or co-hosting 3 podcasts. He's got the Bookworm podcast with Joe Bulig, who is another guest on the show. Productivity show I listen to very often. That's the Asian Efficiency podcast. And I'm also a really big fan of Free Agents. And Mike recently stepped in for Jason Snell as the co-host. So he co-host that with David Sparks, who's also the co-host of Automators, which is a show he recently started with Rose. And if you're at all interested in automation, first of all, check out Rose's recording from Learn OmniFocus. She was our last guest. And also definitely check out the podcast as well. Mike has written a book called Thou Shalt Hussle, and I think you've got a course in the works as well around this, and I'll let you talk more to that. Okay, well, that brings us to our guest of honor for today, so I'll hand it over to you, Mike.
So my experience with OmniFocus is an ever-evolving journey. I mentioned before we officially started that how I use OmniFocus on the Mac in the last couple of weeks has changed a lot. I've got access to the version 3 beta now, and it's basically made OmniFocus on the Mac usable again, which was a good thing for me because most of my life occurs on my Mac, and that's where I used it most of the time. Occasionally I'll use stuff on my iOS devices to trigger workflows and things like that. But I felt like part of me was lost when I had to use version 3 on iOS and had to use version 2 on the Mac. So I'm very happy to see it back, and I am going to actually use that to explain how I set things up, because it just is a lot easier, I think, with that interface where you can see the different panes. But I will echo what Tim said, that this is beta software, so it probably will change. But here is my my OmniFocus setup, and I'll talk a little bit first about how I use the application itself. So I work with agent efficiency. I've got different other projects that I do with other teams, and they don't all use OmniFocus. A lot of them use other systems. So one of the things that people always ask me at Agent Efficiency is, how do you keep track of everything in OmniFocus when your company wants to use something like Jira, which is what we actually use at Agent Efficiency, and you're using OmniFocus for your personal stuff? And there's two approaches to that, in my opinion, and there's no right or wrong answer, but I'll explain what I do. So first, you can create all of the tasks that you're going to do also in OmniFocus and link back to a web-based system like Jira. Just put it in the notes or something like that. I tend to find that is a lot of extra work that doesn't add a whole lot of value. So my approach is that I just maintain two different systems, and I use them for very different use cases. So when I'm going to go in and work for agent efficiency, I'll fire up Jira and I'll pick my tasks, and we've got everybody on the team will create a blog post with the tasks that they're going to work on that day, and they're going to put the links to the Jira issues. They'll update the comments in Jira, so anybody at any time can go in there and see where things are in terms of those work projects. But I use OmniFocus more as setting the direction for my entire day with all the other stuff that I do. So when I'm capturing things that I don't want to forget, those are obviously going to go into the inbox. And then about once a day, I'll try to go through here and make sure that everything's tagged, everything's got a project. If there's a due date that I want to associate with it, I will put the due date on the task, although I hardly ever use due dates. I use defer dates instead. So if I don't want to think about, one of the things in here, actually, if I change this to all, you'll see some things that I've thrown in here and I don't even want to think about them. I'm trying to think. The one that I'm specifically thinking of is for Fizzle. All right, so I have this subscription to Fizzle, which is going to expire March 27th next year, and I don't even want to think about this for a long time. So I've put a defer date on this. I think it's March 1st. In fact, if I open up the inspector, we can see that for sure. Yeah, March 1st. And so that allows me to keep this clean. But I'm going to use this basically to pick the things that I want to work on. Then I'm going to do, I have actually a paper worksheet that I use every single day to guide everything that I'm going to be doing throughout the day. So typically my workflow, the way this will work, and I'll get into some of the details here, but I would go through my planning perspective, which is everything basically that's active. And one of the questions somebody was asking at the beginning was, how do you set up your projects? My project setup is pretty basic, and tags have changed that for me. So these are different projects that I've got going on, and they're basically buckets where I can dump things because I'm not going to close an agent efficiency project. I'm not going to close the faith-based productivity project, is the one you were alluding to, Tim. That's a video course I'm working on based on the book that I wrote. That's going to be something that I'm going to continually put things in. This just happens to be what I'm working on for this right now. And so these projects are set up so that they do not complete with the last action. They are constantly open, and they're basically just the buckets for those things. But when I am going through my day, what I will do is I will go through these and I will select the things that I want to work on, and then I will flag those items. So I've got a couple things that are flagged here for today. And a couple of these I've actually completed. So there were 5 things. Typically, I pick 3 to 5 flagged items, and I will put those in my flagged perspective. And so these are the ones that I have yet to do. But then what I will do once I've identified those tasks is I will fill out this worksheet that I've created. And I've actually got it right here. I'll hold it up maybe so you can see it. So this is something I designed myself. At the top, it's got my life theme. So one of the things that I got from all the books that I've read is having a theme for everything that you want to do, your purpose. Like, why are you here? And I've done enough internal soul searching, enough spirit quests that I've landed on what I believe is my life theme, which is to help people answer the question, why am I here? By inspiring, encouraging, and teaching them how to discover their destiny, connect to their calling, and live the life they were created for. So I have that on the top of my sheet just as a reminder. I see that every single day. And then on the left side of this sheet, I've got an hour by hour time blocking. I'm not sure if anybody here is familiar with the concept of time blocking. You can raise your hand if you are. Cal Newport wrote a blog post, I think it was like 2013, where he said that if you time block 40 hours a day, it's the equivalent, in his opinion, not doing research, but it's equivalent of 60 hours of work if you don't time block it. So I do it in 1 hour time blocks, and you can do this a lot of different ways. You can put the specific tasks that you want to work on. I tend to put kind of like the modes that I'm going to be in. So places that I'm going to be, I've got on here, the Learn OmniFocus webinar that we're doing right now. I've got on here after this, running, home, a call I've got later at 4. I've got worship team practice at my church later on today. And also before we started, we were talking about I mentioned the Dwight Eisenhower quote that plans are worthless, but planning is everything. Okay, so this gives me the intention, but it is open to change. In fact, this has already changed today. So I was going to go for a run after this. I ended up going to the gym instead. So I've done that already, but what that does, like planning this ahead of time, what it does is it gives me the flexibility to do those sorts of things. Basically, what it does for me is it gives me the ability not to have to worry about, if I'm going to change something, what else is being affected, if that makes sense. If you don't write any of this stuff down, there's always that nagging doubt in the back of your mind that you're forgetting something. And then I've got my goals, which are 12-week year goals. So I follow the 12-week year framework, and I pick 3 goals for the quarter. And then my most important tasks. This is the flagged items from OmniFocus. Okay. So I'll write those down. I'll check them off as I go. I typically will not keep OmniFocus open all day, constantly going back here to make sure, what's the next thing I'm going to do? I've got it written down on my piece of paper, and after that, I kind of step away from planning mode, and I'm going to go do the work, if that makes sense. Also on this sheet, hit my microphone. I've got a little section for what would make today awesome. That's just like one thing. I found adding that really helps end the day on a high note. So I've got a reflection template that I use for journaling at the end of the day. One of the questions I ask is pick, 1 to 5 stars. How'd I do today? This is kind of the extra credit thing. So if I can get this done, that would be really great. Sometimes it's personal, maybe it's just, I want to go do something fun, play Breath of the Wild for an hour or something. Sometimes it's business related. And if I could do one other thing to move a project forward, then that's a win, and then any additional notes that I would want regarding what I have to do today, there's a space for that. And at the very bottom, there is a Bible verse that I really like about redeeming the time. So the spiritual why behind all the productivity things for me is to make the most of the time that I've been given. And just a visual reminder every single day that that's what I'm going to do. So I'll go through my planning perspective in OmniFocus. I'll flag some tasks that I want to work on today. I'll use those to fill out this sheet. And then from there, I'm basically off to the races.
One is if it's possible to get a copy of the paper-based sheet that you're using, or is that something you include in your course typically?
That will be sold at some point. That was something that I just wanted to test myself because I had heard about people who had done this sort of thing and how much it helped them. And I was like, well, there's no reason I can't make my own. In fact, the thing that kind of did it for me is I presented at Macstock, I guess it was last month. And the keynote speaker there is a guy named Dr. Mac, Bob Levitas. And he's got a course, Working Smarter for Mac Users, which I'd gone through. And in one point in that course on how to be productive on your Mac, he mentions that he put together a sheet like this that he calls Super Plan. And people have used like the best self journal and stuff like that before. Same concept. Figure out what works for you. I created my own because the best self journal, while I really like it, it was a lot of stuff to fill out every single day, every single week. And I just got to the point where I felt like the 80-20 wasn't there. Like I was putting more work into it than the value that I was getting from it. So I decided, I'm going to create my own thing. I know a little bit about Illustrator. It can't be that hard. So I made one in an afternoon and printed off at a Kinko's, got it glued into a tablet. I think it was like $10 total. And I've just been doing it every day. At the end of the day, I rip this off, I throw it in the garbage. The next morning, I fill out a new one.
And just generally, what is it about paper that's attractive? Because I know you're certainly very adept at using technology, but what does paper deliver that technology kind of misses on?
Pen and paper is permanent. So if I'm filling out a sheet and I'm putting it down in pen, it feels like more of a commitment in my brain. I don't know why that is, but that's just the way my brain is wired. When I write it down on there, it's kind of like, okay, now I'm going to make sure that this happens. Whereas if I do something digitally, I can always defer it another day, if I messed up.
Oh, so the fact it's in pen and paper makes it much less likely that it's there's more of a commitment that goes with the...
Yeah, and it's not the fact that it exists on pen and paper and that's what I work off of during my day necessarily that provides the value. For me, I think personally, it's just the thought and the intention behind condensing what my entire day is going to look like onto a single sheet of paper. I think that's where the value comes in.
And is this something you'd carry around with you? You mentioned you were traveling at Macstock and things like that. So would you be going through the same routine when you're on the road as you do when you're back at home base, or
depends? When I was at Macstock, I did not bring this with because when I was at Macstock, my schedule really wasn't going to be determined by me. I was going to be where they told me to be and doing what they told me to do. But for my standard work day, this is the thing that provides the direction for the entire day, which is the hard part about, we're talking a little bit at the beginning about being a quote unquote free agent. The thing that appeals to people about being a quote unquote free agent is having control over their entire day. A lot of people, you throw them in that situation, it's sink or swim, and a lot of them will sink because they've never had the ability to control their day. So they don't know how to set up those systems and those guardrails to keep them on track. And then pretty soon, you're playing video games for 3 hours instead of doing the work that you were supposed to do. Just me, I guess.
Yeah, right. And there's a question, do you transfer from the sheet from one day to the next, or do you start again? Do you start fresh tomorrow, essentially?
I start fresh. So if there's something that I didn't get done, maybe that would come over. But by only picking 3 to 5, that I've only got space for 5 of my most important tasks. By limiting that, I can pretty much get that all done. In addition to, whatever else we happen to be working on this sprint with agent efficiency. You will see agent efficiency tags in here though, and projects, because there's stuff that I do that's not part of the sprint. The sprint that we use Jira for, that's what we use to create the content for the podcast and the blog and the video courses for the dojo, and really anything that we would do company-wise that we would publish, public-facing, that's going to be in Jira. But part of my responsibility is grooming the backlog and making sure that there's always stuff in the hopper, like all of the ideas that I have for blog posts or podcasts or things like that. Those are going to end up here. And then when I'm going through and thinking about, okay, the next 2-week sprint that we're going to work on, what are the podcasts that we want to record? What are the blog posts that we want to write? Stuff like that. I'll take stuff from OmniFocus and put it into Jira.
Okay, cool. What about all those sort of niggly little tasks? Like some days I'll have like maybe anywhere from about 10 to even 30 of those where it's just a one-off, like pay a bill or deposit a check or those sorts of things. Do those live in OmniFocus, or do you track those elsewhere?
For the most part, those do not. I've automated as much bill pay stuff as I can. I do have some help with this because I'm married. My wife handles a lot of the the bills that we can't automate. And this really, for me, is kind of the planning hub for my personal and professional life. It's not going to be the group stuff. So one of the things, if you listen to the productivity show, my wife was on there at one point. I forget which episode it was, but we talked about how we tried to use OmniFocus together, and she hates it. So we've tried a lot of different things. We've tried Asana for family stuff. Kind of what we've landed on is for the group events. We have a family calendar in iCloud, so we know basically the commitments that we have, and then we've each got individual calendars that we share. We've got reminders lists for like grocery store items and bills that have to be paid, stuff like that. That's where that stuff would live. But it's not going to be cluttering up my OmniFocus.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Well, maybe that'd be a good place to pick up again. There's a couple of requests to talk more about the 12-week year and how that fits into all this.
Yeah.
So kind of weave that in, that'd be fabulous.
Sure. So the 12-week year, and I've got a whole perspective set up for this, which I can share some of these settings. It's really simple. It's just tagged with 12-week year. So the idea behind the 12-week year is that you set your goals, but instead of setting them for yearly goals and then waiting 11 months to get started on them, you set them 4 times a year in each quarter, and you set like a 12-week year. And these are a year's worth of work that I'm going to get done in the next 90 days. And that's kind of the concept. And when people hear that, they're like, yeah, right, you can't do that. Well, turns out you actually can. Because what it does is it provides enough traction and enough, like 90 days seems to be far enough out there where you can get a considerable amount of work done, but it's not so far out there that you're like, I got plenty of time I'll do that later. Okay. So the idea behind the 12-week year is you pick a couple goals that you want to get done, and then you break that down. You figure out what are the things that you need to do, and ultimately what are the habits that you need to create in order to get these things done. So I have I've been doing the 12-week year for about a year and a half, and the first couple of times I did it was absolute garbage. I accomplished nothing. There was actually a podcast episode just released. I think I talked about on Free Agents, but also on the Productivity Show. I kind of went through the whole process that I use for once a quarter. I have this personal retreat, I call it. So it's a thinking day. I get away and I think about what are the things that I want to start doing, stop doing, keep doing, and then what are the projects that I want to complete, the things that I really want to get done this quarter. So the things that I wanted to get done this quarter, I experimented with, and I created a perspective, which is a 12-week year perspective. So what this gives me is a glimpse of the progress that I'm making on the things that I've selected for my 12-week year. So I've got one here for MacStock 2018, and I've prepped and given my short 20-minute talk and also my deep dive. I'm also working on the video content for the Faith-Based Productivity site, which is up, by the way. faithbasedproductivity.com is just a landing page. But if you really wanted to know more about that, you can sign up for that, and then I'll let you know when it's live. But my brother and I shot all the videos. He's he's really good with video. He works with recently they did a thing where they interviewed Aaron Rodgers, the quarterback of the local football team for TNT. You know, they brought him in to do the video and the audio. So I'm pretty blessed to be able to work with him. But there's a couple things that we gotta do, including the daily plan I shared with you. But I'm also working on a weekly plan template, so that's right there. And then I've got some Postbox videos that I'm working on. That one's not a secret, but Postbox, the email client, they reached out to me and asked me if I'd be interested in putting together some videos. So I'm putting together a series of videos for them, and this one actually is done, so I can check that off. But this gives me, at a glance, what I'm doing in my 12-week year, and obviously I can change the view here between things that are available. So if I wanted to pick something to work next, or right now I've got everything that falls into my 12-week year. I kind of like this one because it shows me what I've accomplished and also what I've got left. Whereas if I just had a big list of things that I needed to do, especially as you get towards the end of the 12-week year, if you're not making as much progress as you want, that can be discouraging. But that's also part of the 12-week year system, is that if you don't hit your goals, maybe you only hit 2 out of 3 goals in your 12-week year. That's still pretty good. Plus now, as the next quarter starts, you've got a chance to hit the reset button. So even if it was a complete dumpster fire, you've got a built-in reset, and you can do that 4 times a year. And at the end of the year, the net result is that you get a lot more done than you would have otherwise.
Okay. Yeah, thanks for that, Mike. Just one question around that. How granular do you get in OmniFocus? So I notice you've got an action setup membership plugin on websites. Maybe that's a simple task, but maybe it's really like 10 tasks or something like that. If it were more involved, where would you tend to sort of capture that detail? Would it be in OmniFocus itself, or would you?
Yeah, so that's an example. This is not something that I'm working on right now, but it is quite possible that as I dig into this, that would become a project. I've done it a couple times, so I kind of know what I'm getting into with that one specifically. But I try not to add a whole bunch of tasks to OmniFocus. One of the things that causes people to not use OmniFocus, in my experience, is just having so many tasks in it. And I know, Rose, you made the comment before we started, like, you want to make sure that you have everything in there. You don't want to be forgetting 28 things because you've only got a checklist that has 3. Yes, you absolutely don't want to do that. But this particular task I've done enough times that I don't need all of the checklists. I know I've got to install MemberPress on, or maybe now Patreon, since I got acquired, with my my WordPress site. And when I get into this, maybe it will require some additional definition, but I kind of think that this is probably something I can complete in one day. And so I'll probably just leave that as a single task.
Nice. And there's a great question that just came in about how do you handle checklists for more detailed items? Do they remain in OmniFocus? And one example of a checklist that I use every time I do one of these live sessions is I've got probably a list of must be about 25 different things I need to check, like, is the ringer on the phone off? Is the lighting adjusted? What does my background look like? And I've built this up over time. So I imagine you have some of those as well. Where would those tend to live? Would you keep them in OmniFocus, or would they be somewhere else?
I do have some checklists. I've experimented with using them in OmniFocus. It hasn't really worked that well, in my opinion. The place that I don't know, I've got them in a couple different places. I haven't found an ideal solution. Evernote seems to be okay because you can go through the checklist and then simply uncheck it again and reuse it. Otherwise, reminders for my wife and I, shared stuff, that's going to really be the thing that determines where that's going to live. If I were to create a new checklist personally right now from scratch, which I've actually got a task for today, we're supposed to leave tomorrow to go up to Door County in Wisconsin. It's kind of like the touristy area on the thumb. And we go up there fairly often. My parents have a place up there. And my wife and I identified, we have a weekly family meeting where we figure out, like, again, what should we start doing, stop doing, and keep doing. And we figured out, or one of the things that came up last time was we should have a packing checklist. Okay. So that's one of my tasks, but that's probably going to be a reminders checklist because it's going to be something my wife would use too. Yeah,
something you want to share too.
Yep.
For ones that personally, I keep some of them in OmniFocus, and I took a page out of Joe Bulig's book. I think he showed this when he was a guest on Learn OmniFocus, where he's got basically a checklist is a repeating project that repeats a minute after you mark it complete, and it lives in a separate part of the system. At least that's the way I ended up setting it up, so it's completely separate from all the projects. So I find that works actually quite well. But there's many different ways to do it. And as you were saying, Mike, that's not so good if it's a checklist that's shared among many people. So that's where having something.
Yeah, I do have one of those for my Mike 2.0, I call it. So I've got my morning routine that I keep in here. And that is a checklist that I repeat every single day. I've also got the journaling template. I've got a task for that. And that repeats every single day, although that's just one item. So it's not really a checklist. But again, these are things that I need. There's a fine line between putting them in a checklist to make sure that I do the things and creating a system that is much harder to maintain. So for example, actually this one, let's see, 18th. Okay. Yeah. So these are in the future. I did it for today, but this will go off at 8 a.m. in the morning to make sure that I've followed through in my morning routine, and I've read my Bible, I've prayed, I've meditated, I reviewed my daily plan, and then I've gone through the stretches that I have to do every day. That's the thing that got me to put this in OmniFocus, by the way. I ran a half marathon, my first one in May, and ended up hurting my leg, my knee. I overtrained, basically. And I wasn't sure I was ever going to be able to run again. I went to physical therapy, couldn't run for about 2 months, and they gave me a bunch of exercises and stretches that I have to do every single day if I want to run. So that I had a log of that happening every day. So I put that in my morning routine. But most of the time, I've done all this stuff by the time I get the notification. So I just close the task. And these are subtasks underneath the main task. So when I check the morning ritual box, it checks all of them.
Yeah, okay, cool. So this is just kind of a safety net just to make sure that none of these slip through the cracks.
Yep. Yeah, I've also very much limited the notifications that I get on all of my devices. And so when I do get a notification at 8 a.m. and I see that, it's time to do my morning ritual, if I haven't done it yet already, that can be the thing that gets me to follow through on some of these things. So maybe, I'm pretty good about right away reading my Bible and praying. Meditation, not so much. I'm trying to get into a consistent habit with that at the beginning of the day. And so it's a little bit of a reminder, like, hey, this is the thing that you should be doing. And this is the most important thing that I can do, in my opinion, is this morning routine. It's kind of like, I forget what the story is, but protect the golden goose. The story goes that the goose that lays the golden eggs, if you don't take care of the goose, you stop getting the golden eggs. A lot of the stuff that I do is creative work. I've got to sit down and be able to create kind of on demand. And that requires that I be in a real good mental state, that I'm rested, yada, yada, yada. And so the very best thing that I can do, which is going to make all of my work easier, is that I can make sure that I set myself and my day up for success by executing on this morning ritual.
It'd be great to have a look at your tags, a closer look there, because I noticed a few decide that I haven't, I don't think I've seen that one before. So I guess in general too, how do projects relate to tags? Because that's an area that where people get a little bit confused sometimes. Because in a sense, project's a container, but a tag's also a container. So what's
exactly? Yeah, that was one of the questions I think Jeff had at the beginning was, how do you organize your projects? And a couple of weeks ago, if you were just in OmniFocus too, I would have said, yeah, put them in separate folders, work, personal, whatever other areas of responsibility you want to have. But tags have really changed that for me, because going back to projects and the folder hierarchy, I personally believe there is no work-life balance. There's just life, and you have to balance it. And so you think about how people a lot of times will divvy up their time. They'll have a work and a personal calendar, or will divvy up their projects, got a work and a personal project folder inside of OmniFocus. And maybe that works, but I've got 7 or 8 different side projects now, like things that I'm involved with. I've got kids at home. I want to make sure that I'm prioritizing my family. That's the reason that I started working with Asian Efficiency in the first place, is I wanted to have that control, that flexibility throughout my day. I want to make sure that I'm putting them first. Like, that's complicated. It doesn't fit into real clean delineations between work and personal. So I've gone away from that with my projects and instead have embraced tags. And this is, again, something that is still kind of a work in progress and an experimentation. You will find a work tag here because these are all the things that I do that bring in money. But they're nested underneath there. So what I found is that if I wanted to create a task or a project associated with the dojo, then that is, if I assign it the tag of dojo, it's going to also be assigned Asian Efficiency and work tags. So these nested tags, this is a game changer for me, but I'm still figuring out the ideal way for me to do this. But with a single tag, I can make sure that all of these things are added there.
One question would be, is if it does everything in your Asian Efficiency project also have the Asian Efficiency tag on it, or is the tag used for kind of a different purpose than the project, if that makes sense?
Yeah, well, like I said, this is kind of in flux. Okay. So right now, the project is going to automatically apply an Asian Efficiency tag.
Oh, okay, got it. Yeah, okay.
That's one of the things I like about these projects, is anything that you add to a project, you can automatically apply not just one tag, but multiple tags, which makes it a lot easier to find stuff. I think that tags really is the future of OmniFocus. Like this, And I know things users are like, well, we've been using this forever, but like this just changes so much about how OmniFocus works and how you can combine these things. I mean, the perspective settings that you talked about at the very beginning, you can say contains any of these tags, excludes these tags. But what tags, especially when you combine them, what it allows you to do is give you very granular granular options for filtering, but it doesn't require a complex system in order to keep them straight. Brett Terpstra actually did a presentation on tagging at the MacStock conference, and tagging is kind of, for a long time, I shied away from it because I didn't understand it. I wanted, a cut and dry system. I'm like, this is how you should apply your your tags. But what I've discovered is that it's going to be different for everybody. So you don't want, a ton of these, but you do want the ones that are going to give you every potential combination or option for the combinations that you might want. And nesting actually makes that really, really easy. So I've got tags for the people that I might need to work with. I've got a tag for thinking time, which these are just like, if there's a problem that I want to solve, I consistently set aside thinking time. I try to do it every week. It ends up being more like every 2 weeks, where I can go to this perspective, which is literally just pulling in everything that has a thinking time tag. And then I can select one of these things to work on. And these are things that, if I think through the process, I can create the system that's going to make my life better. It's like the first one on here, for example, make a list of 5 things I don't want to do anymore. That's something that you would tend to put off for a very long time. But if I have, my daily sheet here from 2 to 4, I'm going to be doing thinking time. When it's time to do the thinking time, I can just go to this list or this perspective over here, thinking, and I can just pull one of these things.
So in that instance, you wouldn't put the information on paper. You'd actually go into OmniFocus at that point and pull up the lists.
Yep, to grab the intention.
Yeah.
And then from there, wherever that list might start off in drafts. It kind of depends where I am. My thinking time, I like to get out of the house and go by the water, go by the lake, the river, and just get out in nature basically, and think there. I feel like I think a lot better when when I'm not holed up in my basement office here. I've got a couple tags here for errands, so location-based tags for hardware store, grocery store. I've got a fun tag, so I want to make sure that I'm not just working all the time. Writing tags, thinking time, and a lot of these are things like I've kind of been playing around with, and so some of these, they're bring over from context, and which is why you might not see things here because I'm kind of moving things around right now. Deep work, admin, email. Email is an interesting one. So I am pretty militant about how much time I spend in email. I tend to go in at the beginning of the day, crank through a bunch of stuff, end of the day, crank through a bunch of stuff. If I do get an email that is going to require more than a quick response, I will send it to OmniFocus, and then I will tag it with email. And occasionally, like once a week, I will put on my daily plan to go through and answer all of these emails. So if you were to email me, you're probably not going to get a response right away. But that's one of the things that I'm okay with being bad at.
Okay, nice. There was a question about the do tag and what that signifies.
Yeah, that's a carryover from the context. It was just a personal do context. So those are things that I just need to do, and it doesn't really matter. But going back to definition of context, person, place, thing, tool, whatever that you need to get the thing done. It's not something I need to be at my Mac to do, or I don't need to be in a specific location. It's just something that I need to do at some point.
Is that kind of like an anywhere tag?
Kind of, yep, exactly.
Okay.
Yep. And so all of the things that I don't really have a place for them, we'll typically get the do tag, but then also like that's under personal. Family's also under personal. Got a couple location-based context tags here, which I don't know. The great part about tags is that you don't have to just pick one. And so I'm experimenting with different combinations of these. I still do have, I think, our use case for seeing all the things that I can do while I'm at my Mac, or all the things that I have to do while I'm in my studio. But like I said, my use of OmniFocus is really to set the direction for things. The actual work typically gets done off of the sheet. The exception being the planning stuff. Obviously, I'm in here when I'm planning. When I'm reviewing, I love OmniFocus's review feature, and then the email. So here's all the email I've got to get through before the end of the week.
Nice. And talking about reviews, do you do kind of a formal GTD style weekly review, or is it more sort of ongoing?
Yeah, I try to go through it every week. Most of my projects are set to review once a week. A few of them, like the someday maybe list, is once a month, and so most of my projects get reviewed every week. Obviously, the more tasks that you have in your system, the longer that takes too, which is another reason that I try to keep this as lean as I can.
And where would someday maybe items live? Do those live in OmniFocus, any of them, or are those kept elsewhere?
Yep, I do have a someday maybe project, which just has a couple of things right now. I want to create a book proposal for the next version of my book, and I want to plan a trip to Italy with my wife. Hopefully she doesn't see this and get too excited. It's not on the radar in the near future.
If you want some travel advice, I've been there twice in the last couple of years. So.
Okay, cool. Yeah, and again, this is pretty lean because I go through this, and the things that I'm just like, no, right now it's a no. I tend to get rid of those. The thing from the trip to Italy, that's something that I know I definitely want to have happen at some point. So that's in there just because I want to keep reviewing it. And at some point, that's going to be, I want to do that in the near future. I've also got one that's on pause here to update my book. So I've got different pieces that I need to add to it. And as I get those, I'll throw those in here. This is kind of like a checklist, of things that I want to add to it.
Are you using, talking about checklists, are you using other tools like Omni Outliner or MindNote or things to kind of track ideas and granular details of, like, when you're creating a video or a course or something like that?
Yeah, most of my writing and stuff happens in Ulysses. Typically stuff when I get an idea will be captured to drafts. I do have this whole bucket here of ideas. So this is everything that has an idea tag. So there'll be things in here like ideas for a book to do for Bookworm down at the bottom. Ideas for like free agent episodes, ideas for dojo modules. And the dojo module ones are a perfect example of how I would use this with like stuff for agent efficiency. I would capture the idea in drafts. I'd send it to OmniFocus, apply the criteria. So it's in this ideas bucket. When I am probably on next Tuesday, doing the backlog grooming for the next sprint, and I'm looking through, what are the episodes that we're going to create for the podcast? What are the things we're going to create for the blog? What are the things we're going to create for the dojo? I might go in here and look at one of these course ideas and say, okay, now's the time to work on this. And then I put it in Jira and add all the subtasks and all the story points and things like that.
So this would be like the prompt to add things to Jira in a sense.
Kind of. So There are a lot of times when, not just agent efficiency, but it's like, okay, what next? That's where this ideas bucket comes in. I find it handy to just have a collection of these things that, I don't want to have to sit down and be like, what was that book that somebody told me we should totally cover for Bookworm? I want it to be in a list here, and tags gives me the ability to do that.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. And we haven't talked about iOS so far. I'm curious how that fits into your work and lifestyle and things. Like, what are some things that you might use an iPhone or an iPad for that is distinct from what you do on the Mac?
Yeah. Let me pull this up here. So here's my iPhone, and I will use this typically, like I said, for the morning ritual. If I wanted to tap the phone to check things off, it would appear here. The other thing that I'll use here is I will use the journaling the journaling one that I have here. So let's see. This journal right here. Okay, this has a note associated with it, which is a link to a workflow that I use. Most of the time, I don't tap on this, but I've, for whatever reason, decided that it would be helpful to have this in the notes. If I do tap on this, it would launch the workflow. Another way to do this would be the workflow app. So here's my reflection. And this is what's associated with that task. So it's just a couple simple prompts. What are you grateful for? What time did you get up this morning? What was today's highlight? What could I improve? What could I have delegated, automated, or eliminated? What did I do for exercise? What I get out of today? And then how did I do overall? And then it takes all that information. Oh, come on, Face ID. There we go. And puts it into a markdown table in my reflection journal inside of day one. So here's, all the ones from the previous days.
Oh, that's very slick, Kim.
Yeah. Again, like my approach to this is basically like, what are the things that I want to make sure that I do that are going to move me in the right direction? A lot of times it's not doing one more thing at the office or one more work-related tasks. It's making sure that I've taken care of the golden goose. I really do believe in the power of journaling. One study I read said that it makes you 25% happier. And the reason for that is because you're focused on the growth that's happening instead of being frustrated that you're not where you wanted to be yet. And so I'm trying to make that a habit and make it as easy as possible to collect that information. And then, once a year, typically I'll take a day and I'll go through all of those entries and think through all the things that have happened, all my major accomplishments, the big wins, things like that.
Yeah, I really like how you're getting prompted for specific bits of information too. I think that can be much easier to deal with than just having kind of a blank screen to look at and trying to decide what to type.
Yep, exactly.
And there's a comment, I love the star rating for the journal entry. I think I might have to start doing that as well too.
Yeah, and that's simple to set up with workflow, but then the missing piece there obviously is the prompt to follow through and do it. So that's where the tag with, or the task with the due date of 9:45, and then it repeats every night. Where then typically I get the notification and I'll launch it from workflow. But like I said, I did figure out how to embed the URL in the note for the task. If I wanted to tap on it, I could launch it that way too.
And with the new notifications feature in OmniFocus 3, you could even, without using a due date, you could even have that come up at a specific time, or maybe have it come up at 2 or 3 times if there's a chance you're gonna miss it.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah.
And so I'll use this kind of for reference for things if I need to, and I'll use it for capturing things. Like I said, drafts, typically I'll capture things there and then send them over here. Because I don't tend to track every task that I do inside of OmniFocus. Whoop, my iPhone disappeared. I'm not sure what happened there. Because I don't do that, I don't really have any like complex drafts, task paper templates, although that would be the place that I would do those sorts of things. So if you did want to create a project for every podcast that you recorded, for example, and you want to make sure that you have all the different tasks associated with that, like typically that stuff is going to exist in a different system for me. I just want the ideas, the intentions in OmniFocus, but that's where something like drafts could really help you automate that part of it. But Rose would be probably better to speak to that than me.
Well, talking about automation, there's a question if the workflow, I think it's already been answered. The workflow you were just showing is available in the gallery section of the workflow app, and it sounds like it is.
Cool. Yeah, I've shared it a couple other times. People have asked me for it, and I'm happy to share it again if people can't find it. But
okay, I'll make sure I include it in the notes with the video too.
Actually, if it's not OmniFocus related, but I can run through specifically how this is pieced together just real quick. So I'm asking for input, and then I'm setting those as variables. So that's where you see set variable gratitude, a list, and then set that variable. And then at the end, I just pull it all together. So here's my day one entry, and it's a markdown table, which is the top part. And then with workflow, it's really easy to pull in those variables that you've identified, and that's all that is. And then it just sends it straight to day one and puts it in the main journal with the tag of reflection. And so, yeah, that's typically how I'll use OmniFocus on iOS. Up until I got access to the Mac beta, it was a little bit of a friction point because I was trying to do everything in the iPad version because I really liked the idea of tags and was playing around with them. But I am much happier now to be back on my Mac.
And I think a key piece in all of this too is to choose a way of doing this and do it consistently. And it might be exactly the way Mike does it. It might be somewhat similar. It might be completely different. But I think the key word is consistency, and that's what really builds trust in the system. I know it's sometimes tempting to change things every week, but then you might find you never really get the traction, or you might spend a lot of time kind of fiddling with the dials. So I think this is definitely a case where consistency is a key piece.
Yep. Consistency is key. And then I would argue keep it as simple as you can. And my work is a lot different than maybe some of the other people who are attending here. So maybe you're looking at this and you're thinking that this is kind of useless, because a lot of the stuff that I'm showing is kind of like big picture, thinking about your work before you're doing it sort of thing. But if you do a lot of rote tasks, like you have the flexibility, you could create the project templates and things like that. That's just not really the way that I work.
And a lot of the fact you're using Jira means a lot of those details are somewhere else, really by design. If you were doing those projects independently, I imagine it would look quite different the way you use OmniFocus.
Yeah, it could. Like ScreenCastsOnline, for example, that's an interesting example because it's a technically pretty complicated project, which you could argue I should have a checklist for that. But I've done enough of these modules, I know how it works. And so for me, just having this is just an idea at this point, still yet to be approved. But the next one that I want to do is on timing for Mac. Okay, so I just need the fact that this timing module is going to be due on a specific day. That's all I need to set the direction for me to work on this thing. If I know that this thing has got to be delivered to Don in 2 weeks, then that's where I'm going to put on my daily list, it's time to record the audio. It's time to do these things. And sometimes, I'm kind of gone back and forth. Sometimes those things, I've added them as individual tasks under the bigger project in OmniFocus, but really just having this as like the home base and being like, okay, yeah, that's the thing that I should be thinking about right now. That's enough for me to translate into the effective action.
Okay, nice. This question about, do you always use dark mode, and is there a particular reason why? What do you like about dark mode?
I like it because it's new. No, it's I've been playing with this, and actually I was a little bit mad because yesterday this sidebar was working and now it's not. But the light one with the colored text looks something like this. I like the dark mode a little bit better. I have a feeling I'll probably use dark mode and everything once Mojave gets here.
Yeah, I tend to find for myself it's easier on the eyes too. So
yep.
I've become a dark mode convert, especially in the evening when kind of winding down. It's a lot less light coming into my eyes and waking me up.
Yep.
I have a question regarding the theme options that you showed us. There's the light and the dark mode with and without the color text. Are you finding that for people who aren't on the OmniFocus 3 for Mac Beta, the first available task in each project is highlighted in purple, as you can see here? Mike's got several of those. Are you finding that useful for you, Mike?
Not really. And in fact, I think that is kind of broken to beta software. So if I go to light without colored text, they're still purple.
Oh, yeah, you need to switch.
Then we need to file a beta.
I've already filed a bug on that one. If you switch to like inbox and then go back to that, you'll see it goes back into the proper mode.
Okay.
Just a refresh issue.
I see now what you're talking about. It could be depending on the type of projects that you have set up. So most of mine are parallel projects. If you did sequential projects, I think that would be helpful to see the next available action as a different color. But because I'm going through typically my entire planning perspective and I'm just picking the things that I want to work on and flagging them, I don't think that's that helpful, other than I do like a little bit more color on my screen.
So yours is more like a menu of possible things versus a sort of sequential ordering of tasks. That sounds like the main
Most of the time, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I was just going to ask, Mike, is with so many different responsibilities and roles and so little due dates, how do you keep yourself honest? I mean, is it more just that 12-week planning and kind of a daily review of what your priorities are?
Yeah, the review is key. Whether you do that daily, weekly, as part of your 12-week year, recognizing whether what you've done has worked or not, and then figuring out if there's any changes that you need to make. I am a big fan of agile everything. We use Scrum at Asian Efficiency. One of our core values is Kaizen, which literally means small improvement. The thing that my wife and I use for all of our personal family stuff is those 3 questions I mentioned. Those are the same 3 questions I ask when I do my personal retreat. It's the same 3 questions we use when we go through the retrospective at Asian Efficiency. Is what should we start doing? What should we stop doing? What should we keep doing? And then from there, you can, a lot of times that's enough direction for me, because if something is broken and I have dropped a ball somewhere, then what should I start doing? I know what I should do to fix that. So a lot of this is adjust and repair. And just with 5 kids, like, it's always trial and error.
But I was listening to Free Agents recently. I remember you talked about those 3 questions in your in that latest episode. Yeah.
So I don't know exactly how to describe this, but it's almost like if you ask the right questions, the answers reveal themselves. And so I tend to try and ask questions more often than just head down, get through a big list. You can get, in my experience, you can get so nose down in your to-do list with all of your due dates. Say you have a whole bunch of due dates on a bunch of things, and you're so concentrated on, I just got to crank out as many of these as I can, that you never stop to think about, is this something I should even be doing anymore? And so that's where due dates get in the way for me a lot of times.
I think productivity can come down to people getting more efficient at going around in circles. So that's why it's so key to be doing what Mike's doing and asking those questions and reflecting, and also saying, okay, I had a 3-star day today, but even even acknowledging that and saying, looking at what worked and what didn't work, that's still a valuable day in itself. There's some feedback there versus living 3-star days for the rest of your life and never really even questioning things and say, what could I be doing differently and stuff like that.
Exactly. You get so caught up in, this is the next thing that I've got to do, that you don't really think about what are the things that are really going to move the needle and create the ideal future that I want to create. So the first thing I did, by the way, when I started doing my personal retreats, is I went through a book. It's called 5. I've got it on my bookshelf, but it's basically, it's a red book, and it's got a white number 5 on it if you're going to look for it on Amazon. It's a workbook, and it's basically, where do you want to be in 5 years? And then from there, you can think back and, okay, what are the things that I need to do this year that are going to get me to that place in 5 years? And so that's like a lot of that reflection stuff. That's what I prioritize more than just doing the tasks or the work. I have been in that place before where it's just do one more thing, get one more thing done. And what I realized is that a lot of the times when I was operating that way, I was stressed out. What I learned when I stopped doing some of those things was that some of those things that I was, quote unquote, forcing myself to follow through and do because I made a commitment in my head, like they really weren't that important. And so what I try to do is make sure that everything is in alignment, and I'm only doing the important but not urgent tasks, I guess would be the best way to describe that. If you're thinking about like that Eisenhower matrix, there's always a case to be made for the things that are urgent. And a lot of times if you work in like an office environment, you've got people telling you things that are urgent but not important, but they're disguising themselves as urgent and important. And I wanted to create a system where I was able to escape those things and really think about how am I going to prioritize the time for the things that are important but aren't urgent.
I could take a page out of that book.
Yeah, it's natural. I think. Don't feel bad. I mean, everybody, if you don't have a perspective change, like you'll be sucked into it. So I try to force myself to get, as Sam Carpenter would say, and work the system above and slightly outside your situation, so you can see it for what it really is. I review. I'm amazed how little is in there. Yeah, I know. It's one of the things that made me really nervous about doing this. Is it's pretty lean. I guess get back to like the David Allen thing. You know, you want to have a system to capture everything on the paper, off the mind. So I use it for that, but then after that, like I typically don't just create projects for the sake of projects. I do keep it pretty clean. I do my reviews once a week. I try to do them on Sunday afternoons, but I do make sure that I get through and I look at all the things that are in there. I think that's really the key to making any system work, is being able to look through everything and feel good about everything that's in there. That way you don't fight if you don't do that, in my opinion, the urge is always, I'm forgetting something. So once a week is enough to touch those things and look at them, mark it as reviewed. You know, there's nothing else that should be in this project necessarily, to give me the peace of mind. But again, that's a reason why I don't have a bunch of stuff in there, because if I know people who have like 10,000 tasks in their OmniFocus, and I don't envy their weekly reviews.
And that's one area where the 12-week year, I think, really shines, is rather than trying to do a whole massive projects over the course of 12 months. I find from my own experiences, it's much more efficient to do a small number of projects within quite a contained period of time, and then have the satisfaction of completing those and move on and do other things too. So I think if I'm not starting something in January and I'm not going to be done till December, then it's very easy to lose momentum on it, versus if I start in January and I'm in March, then I'm raring to go for, okay, what am I going to do in April?
Yep. Yeah, definitely. I guess another thing related to that would be a lot of times you can capture, literally everything that comes to your mind. But as you saw, my someday maybe list is pretty sparse too. I find that with a lot of the stuff that you capture, forcing yourself to make a decision on those things helps a lot. The tendency, I've been there, where your someday maybe list is 1,000 items long, and you hate going through it because you feel like you're not making any traction. By keeping it short and then going into those personal retreat days, those thinking days, as it's kind of like a blank slate. It's an opportunity to get things done, as opposed to, okay, I'm already behind. Like, what am I going to knock out in the next 12 weeks? It gives you a different perspective, in my opinion, where it's kind of starting from zero, and it's like, okay, what should I create with the next 90 days? That's, to me anyways, that's an important difference. Does that make sense to everybody? Where instead of like having a list of things that you feel compelled, like I need to complete these at some time, you're really just going in there with, okay, so the world is my oyster. What do I want to do? What do I want to accomplish? And at least for me, I get more done that way.
I like the idea of separating someday and maybe, because saying it's someday, there's a commitment to doing it, even if the time at which it's going to be done is not defined yet. Whereas maybe there's no commitment. It's just kind of could be more of a pipe dream at that point. So I think kind of putting them into one list that's someday and maybe can be a little confusing. Whereas if you say, okay, I'm definitely someday going to go to Italy, whether it's next year or 10 years from now, then it's a little easier to deal with. There's more of a commitment there.
Yep. No, that makes sense. I also try to keep the tags. I'm pretty minimalist in a lot of the things that I do. But I know you were showing at the very beginning, Tim, like you looked like different energy level tags with the emojis. Like I've experimented with stuff like that. And a lot of what I've got is just the stuff that's worked for me. A case can totally be made for those energy level contexts. But personally, like I do believe, I mean, the tagline for the productivity show is, welcome to the Productivity Show, the Agent Efficiency podcast dedicated to helping you make the most of your time, attention, energy, and focus. Like those are the key things. And if you need tags to support you in that, then there's absolutely, those are absolutely valid. But sometimes there's a deadline looming or there's an emergency and it doesn't matter how much energy you have. Like you've got to, in the moment, create the motivation to get it done. And so like, for me, I got rid of those after a while because it was like, well, this is another decision I've got to make whenever I'm looking at my tasks and reviewing things. And in the moment, as I'm have to get this episode published or whatever, like it really doesn't help me, if that makes sense. So
yeah, I think a good question to ask is the time you're putting into adding these extra tags actually overall improving your productivity, or is it a make work project that you've been doing for years without even really questioning, is this useful or am I actually using these things? So if you're putting energy level tags on everything but you never use them, I'd say, what's the point? It's just just continue that, and you can always come back and use them in the future if that's useful.
Yeah, in my opinion, like everything that I'm going to add to my system has to prove itself. Like it's got to deliver some value for me to put it in there. So I've been in that place where I've fiddled with stuff and I've tried different things, and I'm still in that place. Like I still get, hey, somebody did it this way. Maybe I should try doing it that way. At one point I had talked about the Colby test, like the different modes that you operate in. And I was like, oh, when I get tags, I'm going to create tags for all the different modes so I can select like this type of task and that type of task. And I just realized like that doesn't really help me day to day. So I quickly cut it out.
And the other piece there is if it's not really worth your time to add those tags manually, but they can be added automatically through some sort of automation, like as part of a template, and then I'd kind of say, why not? Even if you use them once a week, it's not really costing you anything in terms of putting them in there. So that's
true.
Yeah. So as I was quoting David Allen earlier, as simple as possible, but no simpler. Don't oversimplify the system, but don't add unnecessary complexity that ends up making it a kind of a drag to use, and where too much of your attention is going to the management and not enough on the actual work.
Yeah. Or make friends with Rose so she can automate it all for you.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, I'm willing to help out.
Give it a try. Thread on the Mac Power Users podcast where people can propose any.
Yeah, that's basically the Automators forum now. People are like, hey, how can I do this? Yeah.
And again, it's worth investing some time in automation, not so you're spending an hour to save 5 minutes, but if you spend 5 minutes and save like 20 hours over the next year, that makes a difference. The thing I love about automation too is it does promote consistency. So if you've got something you're doing over and over again, if you're going to automate it, you're probably going to really think about what are the specific tasks I need to do and refine it and put the proper tags and everything on it. Whereas if you're doing every project ad hoc, that probably wouldn't be feasible.
Yep. One other question here in the chat, by the way. It says, what change would you recommend for OmniFocus to fit it for family use? Really like OmniFocus, have it all well structured. All I need is my wife to start on top of it. I would say wait till the web version comes out. That may be the thing that makes it work. I really have no idea what that's going to look like. But I envision a world where you can share certain tasks or certain projects with specific people, and then they could go in and check things off. I think like if I was able to do that, I could maybe get my wife on board with it. We've got a system now that works pretty well, so I'm not sure it'd be worth it for me, but that's where I would look to solve that. I think the web-based version is going to be a simplified version of OmniFocus. I don't think there's going to be a whole lot of opportunity to create. It's probably going to be more of a view. You can check things off as completed. If you are using a Mac or iOS at home and you have to use a PC at work, that sort of thing, where you can view your list.
Yeah, I think it's going to, at least start off in a pretty basic way, and then I guess it's partially to test the waters, see how many people are using it, and what features they might add on in the future. But it's really meant to be an add-on to the Mac and iOS. It's certainly not a standalone app. It's not a replacement by any means.
I hope it kind of stays that way, to be honest. I like the simplicity. I think like that was a big thing that got a lot of people in the Asian efficiency community anyways to move from OmniFocus to Things. Was it's just so simple. It's so clean, it's so pretty, it's so shiny. And I think that with the tags in the new system, there's a lot of flexibility and power there, but it's almost hidden. Like it feels a lot more simple and approachable. And I think once you dive into it, you can really create some crazy perspectives. But I do think that for the average user, tags will make a lot more sense and make it a lot less complex. If you're looking at OmniFocus 3 and what are tags? Oh, they can be anything that you want to organize your stuff. Oh, okay, I get that. As opposed to what's a context? Oh, a context is according to GTD, the person, place, or thing you need to get something done. What constitutes a project, a single action list, all that type of stuff. Like if OmniFocus 3, in my opinion, feels a lot more friendly to somebody who's new to it.
And in general, I think a way to look at any sort of system, whether it's OmniFocus or Things or whatever you're using, is what do I want to get out of this thing? What sort of list do I want to be able to generate? And then that dictates what tags and what projects and folders are actually used. So if I want a list of all the things that I can only do at work if John is there, then I need some way of distinguishing work tasks, and I need some way of distinguishing John and the physical location of work. And so that defines what tags and projects and things versus just going to a list of way other people are using tags and trying to kind of make it fit into your system. Start with the end goal in mind. Yep,
totally.
And then just build it out gradually. Maybe add one tag each week, and maybe delete one while you're at it, and then just kind of experiment with it, and gradually you'll probably land on something that's pretty close to what you need. But then you might have a change in your life where you need some new tags and the other ones aren't relevant. And so it's not about getting a system that you're going to use for the next 10 years. There's going to be some changes that inevitably take place, and just make sure that your system is a reflection of your life, essentially.
Yep, it's not static. It's living. It's breathing. And I think that's an important thing, is to consistently be thinking about what sorts of changes should I make? Not that you're constantly making the changes. In fact, that reminds me, going back to something that somebody had said previously. I forget exactly what the comment was, but the thing that I'm reminded of is the 3 times rule, where if something is bothering you, if your system is broken and you're recognizing that it's broken and it's taking you longer to do something, it was regarding automation. So if I'm filling out that journal template, every night, and I have the thought 3 times essentially, and I don't have like a checklist for the number of times that I think about this, but if I recognize that I'm having this thought more than once, like, man, this is taking me forever to create all this markdown by hand. That's the type of thing where it's like, okay, I want to figure out a way to automate this. I want to tweak my system so that it's more efficient. But the first time that you notice something is a little bit harder than it needs to be. For the average person, that's not the time to automate.
Thank you very much, Mike, for being here today and sharing all of your wisdom. And thanks to everyone who joined here live. Lots of great questions and comments. And if you're watching a recording, thanks for watching, and I hope to see you all again soon. Take care.